Welcome back everyone, it is Mike from Mana Hoarders. In this video we are bringing you a commander deck tech for a pair of Elven partner commanders, Gillanra and Nadir. While recently modifying one of my own personal commander decks, I swapped out one of my partners for Gillanra, and I was actually quite surprised at how much work this card was able to do. Commander Legends brought us tons of new commanders, and I feel that a lot of them haven't gotten as much discussion as they should. And to be perfectly honest, when Gillanra was first spoiled, I honestly looked at the card and kind of just kept moving because it didn't really seem that interesting. A 3-mana mana dork that lets you draw cards when you cast a spell with CMC 6 or greater really did not seem that impressive in my opinion. Now, since using it in one of my own personal decks, I can say I've been pleasantly surprised. For 3 mana, a 1/2 that taps for a green is not that threatening, so it's not likely to draw a lot of removal from your opponents. Also, it can technically give you a source of repeatable card draw if you are casting spells that are big enough. So since I've been enjoying the card so much, I figured why not try and build a deck around it. Now enter Nadir, Agent of Dusknull, which also happens to be an elf, and it costs CMC 6, so it synergizes very well with Gillanra. Whenever a token we control leaves the battlefield, it gets a 1/1 counter, and whenever Nadir leaves the battlefield, we create a number of 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens equal to its power. We do have two main strategies for this deck. The first is an elf token tribal deck, which means we're going to get our elves out, pump up as many of them as possible, and swarm our opponents. And the second relies on using Gillanra's ability to cast large spells, get a little bit of card draw, and turn the tide of the board to our favor. The final price for this build specifically came in at $115.38. This does include the price of our commanders and all of our lands. Now do bear in mind some of these prices will vary greatly depending on the quality of the cards you purchase, the vendor you use, and a variety of other factors. I would rate this current build at around a 5 or 6 out of 10 on the power scale. Now of course, if we did make some adjustments, we could probably increase the power a little bit, but I feel with some of the large spells we are including, it wouldn't do too well at some of the faster tables, so do keep that in mind. Now let's go ahead and dive into the deck. First up are our artifacts. God Pharaoh statue. Since it costs 6 CMC, we can potentially get some card draw with our commander. Also, spells our opponents cast cost 2 more to cast, so if we can ramp and get this out early, we can greatly slow our opponents down, giving us an advantage. Obelisk of Erd. Playing off of the tribal strategy, we can give creatures we control of the chosen type +2/+2. Ronus' Monument makes our green creatures cost 1 less. Also, whenever we cast a creature spell, target creature we control gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. Soul Ring can tap for 2 colorless mana. And Throne of the God Pharaoh. At the beginning of our end step, each opponent loses life equal to the number of tapped creatures we control. Moving on to our instance, Elven Ambush, we create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token for each elf we control. Fog will prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn. Golgari Charm, we can give all creatures -1/-1 until end of turn, destroy target enchantment, or regenerate each creature we control. Second Harvest, for each token we control, we create a token that's a copy of that permanent. Village Rites, we can sacrifice a creature to draw 2. Vitalize will untap all creatures we control. We will be including 1 planeswalker in this build, Tyvar Kell. It synergizes very well with what our deck wants to do. Makes it so our elves can tap for a black mana, untaps our elves, creates elf warrior creature tokens, and his -6 gives us tons of card draw if we can pull it off. Moving on to our creatures, we do have some legends in the elf world helping out our commanders. Abomination of Llanowar has Vigilance, Menace, and the power and toughness are each equal to the number of elves we control plus the number of elves in our graveyard. Dwynnen Gilt Leaf Dean has Reach, pumps up our elves, and whenever she attacks we gain a life for each attacking elf we control. Lathril Blade of the Elves, a newer commander, has Menace. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we create that many 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens, and we can tap her and tap 10 untapped elves we control, and each opponent loses 10 life and we gain 10. Marwyn the Nurturer, whenever another elf enters the battlefield under our control, she gets a 1/1 counter. We can also tap her to add an amount of green mana equal to her power. Miara Thorn of the Glade. Whenever Miara or another elf we control dies, we can pay 1 and 1 life, and if we do, we can draw a card. And Noth of the Gilt Leaf. At the beginning of our upkeep, we may have target opponent discard a card at random, and whenever an opponent discards a card, we can create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. And for our not-so-legendary creatures, Beast Whisperer, whenever we cast a creature spell we can draw a card. Copperhorn Scout, whenever it attacks we can untap each other creature we control. Dwynnen's Elite, whenever it enters the battlefield if we control another elf we get a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Elvish Archer Druid pumps up our elves, and can tap add a green for each elf we control. Elvish Dreadlord, whenever it dies non-elf creatures get -3/-3 until end of turn. Elvish Mystic can tap for a green. Elvish War Master. Whenever one or more elves enter the battlefield under our control, we get a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token, but this ability only triggers once each turn, and we can use the ability to pump up our elves +2/+2 and give them Death Touch. Fyndhorn Elves can tap to give us a green mana. Immaculate Magistrate, we can tap it and put a +1/+1 counter on target creature for each elf we control. Imperious Perfect pumps up our elves, we can also pay a green and tap it to get a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Llanowar Elves taps to give us a green mana. Lys Alana Bowmaster, whenever we play an elf spell, we can have Lys Alana deal 2 damage to target creature with flying. And if we have the Bowmaster, we can't forget the Huntmaster. Whenever we cast an elf spell, we may create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Lys Alana Scarblade, we can tap it, discard an elf card, and target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is a number of elves we control. Nadir's Nightblade, whenever a token we control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. Paradise Druid has hexproof as long as it's untapped, we can tap it for 1 mana of any color. Poison Tip Archer has reach, death touch, and whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Shaman of the Pack, whenever it enters the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to the number of elves we control. Skemfar Avenger, whenever another non-token elf or berserker we control dies, we can draw a card and lose a life. Skemfar Shadow Sage, whenever it enters the battlefield we can choose 1. Each opponent loses X life, where X is the greatest number of creatures we control with the same type, or we can gain X life, where X is the greatest number of creatures we control that have the same type. Wolverine Riders, at the beginning of each upkeep, we create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token, and whenever another elf enters the battlefield under our control, we gain life equal to its toughness. Moving on to our sorceries, Collective Unconscious, we draw a card for each creature we control. Elvish Promenade, we create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token for each elf we control. A great way to close out a game if we have enough of our mana generators on the board. Exsanguinate, we can pay X into black, each opponent loses X life and we gain life equal to the life lost this way. Harvest Season, we can search our library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of tapped creatures we control, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Hurricane can deal X damage to each flying creature and each player. One of our large spells, Engarrick's Wake, can destroy all creatures and planeswalkers we don't control. Plague Wind can destroy all creatures we don't control and they can't be regenerated. Rampant Growth, we can search our library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Roots of Wisdom, we can mill 3 cards, then return a land card or elf card from our graveyard to our hand, and if we can't, we can draw a card. Sign in Blood, target player draws 2 and loses 2. Victimize, we can choose 2 target creature cards in our graveyard, sacrifice a creature, and then put those onto the battlefield tapped. Moving on to our enchantments, Alpha Status, the enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each other creature on the battlefield that shares a creature type with it. Bastion of Remembrance, whenever it enters we get a 1/1 white human soldier creature token, and whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent loses 1 and we gain 1. Cryptolith Rite makes it so our creatures can tap to add 1 mana of any color. Death's Presence, whenever a creature we control dies, we can put X 1/1 counters on target creature we control, where X is the power of that creature. Elderfang Venom, attacking elves we control have death touch, and whenever an elf we control dies, each opponent loses 1 and we gain 1. Hydra's Growth, I included it for the synergy with our second commander Nadir. The enchanted creature gets a 1/1 counter on it, and at the beginning of our upkeep we will double the number of 1/1 counters on the enchanted creature. Phyrexian Reclamation, we can pay 1 in the black and 2 life and return target creature card from our graveyard to our hand. Presence of God, the enchanted creature can tap to create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Primeval Bounty, whenever we cast a creature spell we get a 3/3 green beast creature token. Whenever we cast a non-creature spell we can put 3 +1/+1 counters on target creature we control, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control we can gain 3 life. Prowess of the Fair, whenever another non-token elf is put into our graveyard from the battlefield we create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Quest for Renewal, as long as there's 4 more quest counters, untap all creatures we control at the beginning of each other player's untap step. Vampiric Rites, we can pay 1 in the black, sacrifice a creature to gain a life and draw a card. And Wild Growth, the enchanted land can tap for an additional green mana. And last but not least is our mana base. We are keeping things very simple with 19 basic forests and 16 basic swamps. And just like that, we've reached the end of this Commander deck tech for our Elven partner commanders. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, tell your friends about us, and leave a comment down below. Let us know what commanders you would like to see us build around in the future. We really appreciate all of your support.